When the cameras went live, the room was already electric. Gavin Newsom did not waste a single second. He leaned forward, his tone sharp, his words like fire cutting through the air. "Governor Abbott," he began, "you've turned Texas into a cautionary tale for the rest of America." The audience gasped at the audacity, and in that instant the nation knew this would not be a routine exchange of talking points. It was going to be a political brawl. Newsom raised his voice just enough to dominate the stage, hammering each syllable with precision. "You've left families in the dark, quite literally, during blackouts. You've shipped vulnerable migrants like cargo across the country, and you call that leadership?" His accusation struck hard, designed to sting, designed to linger. Abbott smirked, waiting for his chance to strike back, but the damage was already done. Newsom had set the tone, igniting the clash before Abbott could even settle into his chair. Viewers across the country felt the tension ripple through their screens. This was not polite disagreement. This was war declared in prime time. The debate stage glowed under the bright studio lights, two podiums set like battle stations for men who represented not just their states, but two radically different visions of America. On one side, Gavin Newsom, the Democratic governor of California, polished, articulate, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who had become a national figure. On the other, Greg Abbott, the Republican governor of Texas, firm, defiant, determined to prove that his state's model of hardline policies and aggressive independence was the true path forward. The moderator barely finished the opening introductions when the tension cut through the air like a blade. Immigration was the first topic, and Abbott wasted no time making it personal. "Governor Newsom," he said, voice firm, "California has become a sanctuary for chaos. Crime is up, homelessness is rampant, and illegal immigrants pour across your border with no accountability. Don't lecture Texas about responsibility." Newsom shot back immediately. "The only chaos is the one you've manufactured. You use human beings as political props, shipping families across the country to score points on cable news. California builds communities, Texas builds cages." The audience erupted, some cheering, others booing. The clash of ideals was on full display. It was not just about policy. It was about identity, about which vision of America would dominate. The moderators tried to steer the debate, but both men knew this was bigger than questions and answers. It was theater. It was combat. It was the showdown the nation had been waiting for. Abbott leaned in, his tone colder now. "California is collapsing under your so-called progressive leadership. Businesses are fleeing, families can't afford to live there, and your streets are filled with tents instead of opportunity." Newsom raised his hand, cutting through Abbott's attack. "What's collapsing is the myth of Texas as some shining example. Your power grid failed. Texans froze to death in their homes, and you dared to blame the windmills while people buried their loved ones." Gasps echoed across the studio. The moderators glanced nervously at each other, knowing control was slipping away. This was not a debate anymore. It was a collision of two Americas in real time. The moderator called for calm, but neither man intended to back down. The questions barely mattered now. Each answer was a weapon, each rebuttal a strike. Newsom tightened his jaw, his voice cutting through the noise like steel. "Governor Abbott, let's speak plainly. Your leadership has failed Texans. Children shivering in classrooms during blackouts, mothers forced to drive hours for basic health care because of your draconian bans, and a state government that treats compassion as a weakness. That's your legacy." Abbott's smile hardened into a glare. "You sit in Sacramento and preach, but Californians are fleeing in droves. They're coming to Texas because we believe in freedom. Freedom from high taxes, from suffocating regulation, from the nanny state you've built. You call it progress, but your state is bleeding people and businesses. The American dream doesn't live in California anymore. It lives in Texas." The studio roared, half the crowd erupting in applause, the other half shouting in anger. Newsom waited just long enough for the cheers to fade, then struck with precision. "Freedom?" He spat the word like venom. "Tell that to women who've lost the right to make decisions about their own bodies in your state. Tell it to voters who face deliberate barriers at the ballot box. Tell it to the migrants you dumped on city streets without food or shelter. You call it freedom. The rest of us call it cruelty." Abbott's retort came fast, like a rehearsed blade. "California's idea of freedom is open borders, fentanyl streaming across, homeless encampments outside every school, and taxes so high that working families can't survive. That's not freedom. That's failure." The clash was relentless. Every line was crafted to draw blood, to land on front pages, to go viral before the night was over. The moderators could barely keep order, their voices drowned out by the thunder of applause and outrage. Newsom leaned in, his tone sharper, almost daring Abbott to deny the words. "You talk about failure, but the truth is this. You've built a state where suffering is policy, where pain is political theater, and where cruelty is the brand. Texas deserves better than that. America deserves better than that." The words landed like a hammer. Abbott's eyes narrowed, his hand gripping the podium. "And America deserves better than the hypocrisy of California, a state that lectures the nation while drowning in crime, debt, and decay. You can't even keep your own house in order, Governor. Don't you dare tell Texans how to live." The audience exploded again. It was no longer about facts or figures. It was raw emotion, ideology clashing against ideology. Two governors turning the debate into a battle for the soul of the country. The air inside the studio was thick with tension. Every exchange had pushed the temperature higher, and the moment was reaching a breaking point. The moderator tried to shift to economic policy, but Gavin Newsom refused to let go of the momentum he had built. He straightened his stance, voice sharp, commanding, and unflinching. "Governor Abbott," he said, pausing just long enough for every viewer to lean in, "your policies aren't conservative. They're corrosive. You've betrayed the very values this country was built on. Texas was once a symbol of grit and freedom. Under your leadership, it has become a testing ground for authoritarian rule." The audience erupted, some rising to their feet in thunderous applause, others booing so loudly that the microphones barely caught the next words. Abbott raised his voice above the chaos, his anger breaking through his calm facade. "How dare you stand there and call Texas authoritarian? You run a state where crime runs wild, where businesses suffocate, and where people are desperate to leave. California is the cautionary tale, not Texas." But Newsom didn't flinch. He leaned forward, his voice cutting like a blade. "Authoritarianism doesn't arrive with tanks in the streets. It arrives when leaders strip away rights, silence dissent, and use cruelty as law. And that, Governor Abbott, is exactly what you've done. You've turned Texas into a laboratory of fear." The moderator pounded the desk, begging the crowd to quiet down. The studio was chaos. Cheers, jeers, gasps colliding into a storm of noise. Abbott, red-faced now, slammed his hand against the podium. "You think you can lecture Texans? You think Hollywood values will ever replace Texas values? Not a chance. We lead and America follows." Newsom struck back with the line that would dominate headlines for days. "If America follows Texas under your watch, it will be following a path away from freedom, away from democracy, away from the future. And history will remember you, not as a leader, but as the man who tried to drag America backward." For a moment, silence pierced the chaos. The words hung heavy in the air, searing themselves into the minds of everyone watching. Abbott opened his mouth to respond, but the roar of the audience drowned him out. It was the clash's breaking point, a dramatic crescendo that left no one untouched. The moderators finally managed to restore a fragile silence, but the energy in the room was uncontainable. Both governors stood firm, shoulders squared, eyes locked, as if the debate stage had transformed into a battlefield. The nation watched, waiting for the final blow. Gavin Newsom seized it. He lowered his voice, not with weakness but with certainty, forcing the audience to lean closer. "This debate isn't just about Texas or California. It's about America's future. We stand at a crossroads, one road built on fear, division, and cruelty, the other built on hope, freedom, and possibility." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Governor Abbott, you can cling to fear, but the rest of us, we're moving forward. And the question every American must answer is this: do we want a country trapped in the past or a country bold enough to build the future? The audience erupted, this time not in chaos but in something larger, a roar that felt like a wave sweeping through the nation itself. Supporters leapt to their feet, chants echoing through the studio, while Abbott's loyalists shouted just as fiercely in defiance. It was no longer about who won or lost the night. It was about what the showdown represented. Abbott tried to fire back one last time, his voice cutting against the noise. "The future you promise is a mirage. Texans will never bow to the kind of control you call progress. We are the last line of defense for true American freedom." But the words, though strong, were drowned beneath the thunder of reactions. Newsom's final strike had already claimed the spotlight. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the face-off. Two men, two visions, locked in a symbolic duel for the nation's identity. Across America, living rooms buzzed with arguments. Social media exploded in real time, hashtags trending, clips spreading like wildfire. Commentators scrambled to frame what had just happened, but one truth was undeniable. The clash between Gavin Newsom and Greg Abbott had transcended politics. It was now etched into the story of a divided nation searching for its soul. As the debate closed, Newsom's words lingered, echoing far beyond the studio. Fear or future, authoritarianism or freedom, the choice is ours. And with that, the governor's showdown ended not with a handshake, but with a nation stunned, electrified, and more aware than ever that the battle for America's direction was only just beginning.